What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube, and today I've got another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released films and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. Today I'm reviewing one of the ones I was most anticipating for this entire year once I saw who was in it and who was behind it. I'm talking about the new age take on a classic Dracula story. I'm talking about the vampire deal, Abigail, 2024's Abigail. Done by Radio Silence with Melissa Barrera. There was a lot of talk about this before the year started, as Melissa and Radio Silence were working on this in lieu of working on Scream. And this was taking up a lot of their time, and then with Jenna Ortega going over to Wednesday and on Beetlejuice and all that stuff, this was talked about a lot as kind of being part of the reason for the delay of Scream, and then of course all the controversy with Scream happened. But today we're not talking about Scream, we're talking about Abigail, and I came in very excited. Now, if you've seen the trailer, because we're not going to spoil anything here, if you've seen the trailer, you know it is a vampire ballerina. They make a lot of jokes about it. She's twirling and dancing around and killing people. It looks like a silly movie and a cheesy movie, but a really fun, over-the-top one that you can turn your brain off and watch, and also get some good horror elements in there. So let's talk about Abigail and see where it went right and where it went wrong overall. This is a 2024 release, written by Stephen Shields and Guy Busick. I don't recognize much of Shields' work. I've seen a couple of his things that I wasn't terribly a fan of. Guy Busick obviously was the writer for Scream 5 and 6 and for Ready or Not, which is where the directors come from. This is directed by Open and Gillette, which are Radio Silence, as you know again from Ready or Not, from Scream, things like that. It's starring Melissa Barrera as Joey, Dan Stevens as Frank, Alicia Weir as the titular character Abigail, Catherine Newton as Sammy, and also featuring other talented actors like the since-deceased Angus Cloud and Giancarlo Esposito from Breaking Bad fame. So really all-star cast here. And that's where I'm going to start as far as the review goes. Again, spoiler-free, it just came out last Friday. I'm posting this the following Thursday. I just saw it with my buddy Neil last night. Shout out to Neil. Saw it last night, so it's only 6 days old. So no spoilers on this channel, but I will try and review thoroughly as possible without spoilers. Essentially, a bunch of people get brought into this big, gigantic mansion because they're collecting on a hit, basically. They are kind of like mob people. They're working to do a job for money, and they realize that this person they've been working on, or kidnapping, or whatever you want to call it, this little girl is not your stereotypical little girl. She is not this frail, meek person. She is, in fact, part ballerina, part vampire. That's all in the trailer, no spoilers here. Starting off, acting/casting, I have our major positives. Again, I read off the cast. Love Melissa Barrera. I think she's a breakout star of the last couple of years within The Heights and Scream and all that. Big fan of hers, and she really brings some extra added heart to this movie. Catherine Newton, of course, we've seen a lot of her recently and the last couple of things that she's done with Lisa Frankenstein and Freaky and stuff like that. Big fan of hers. Alicia Weir, I think, is Abigail. Again, kids can be hit or miss. In movies like this, I think Alicia Weir has the right combination of like silly innocence and then the really demonic dark stuff when things go down later in the film. Plays a nice foil between the sublime and the over-the-top. And of course, Giancarlo Esposito, Angus Cloud, rest in peace. Everyone does a nice job here with their characters. And I'll go into this again more, but some of their characters are just there for like funny lines and comedy and funny reactions, and they nail those. And there's other characters that are the more intense, serious ones that are in your face, and they have a nice kind of a balance, right? Some, like, usually when there's a comedy character in there, they're just there to be over the top, and it usually goes too far. In this case, you've got two characters in this movie who have serious traits about them, but they're very they're on one linear path. They have one job, and they do their job very well. Every character has kind of a staunch characterization, and yeah, it's a little bit too on the nose. The characters are a little bit too obvious, but I think every character plays their role well in this. You have Dan Stevens, who's a very intense kind of a know-it-all character. Melissa Barrera has a hardened edge, but also a heart of gold kind of thing, and some of the redeeming qualities in her as well that aren't in a lot of the other cast members. But I think everyone plays their characters well, and I think the balance between comedy characters and serious characters really gives this a nice balance. The next thing is a big positive is dialogue. Again, while I've always liked Busick's writing and not so much Shields's, they come together nicely here with some good dialogue. All the characters have some time to build this quick rapport. And I think as they kind of get into this one location, this one big encompassing location, this one setting, they have time to kind of bond with each other, and they have to not give each other a ton of info about themselves, but be able to portray a lot through just little looks and little eyes and little just like quick responses. And they do a nice job with that. Again, acting and characters, this is a credit to them, building the characters with little simple things, but I do think the chemistry in these characters is pretty good, and that will come back later in the film. I think in the way this is written, the characters know when to be silly, know when to be serious, and know when to take the serious moments as silly so as not to destroy the antagonist, but so as to, again, keep the dialogue flowing, keep the funny moments interspersed with the serious ones. And I think in a movie like this, you can get away with it. Sometimes when people are making jokes during like scenes where they're running for their lives or scenes where they're getting murdered, usually it's too much for me. But in this case, when we're talking about a vampire ballerina who's floating around killing people, I think it's okay to be a little silly. This movie has some really good traits of Night of the Demons for me. If you guys know Night of the Demons from back in the 80s, this is very much reminds me of that in a lot of ways, which is a positive thing. So good acting, good casting, good dialogue. The gore in this is really good. They don't spare any expense on the gore. You don't see a lot at first. It is a tiny bit of a slow build. This movie runs an hour and 49, but I don't think the pacing is bad. My friend didn't love the pacing on this. He said to me, I'm kind of waiting for the horror things to happen in this horror movie, but I kind of liked it because in that pacing, you kind of figure out, again, through simple gestures, who these characters are and kind of what their backstory is without dumping too much at you at once. So it does almost feel like a bit of a crime drama or something like that before it gets into a horror movie. But as it does, the pacing worked for me, not so much for my buddy, but when it gets there, the gore goes crazy. Radio silence, much like they did in Ready or Not, which you guys know I'm a huge fan of on this channel. If you watched this before, I've reviewed that movie as well. Go back and check that one out. But very much like Ready or Not, which this movie I think pays some homages to and some particular things that I won't spoil, I see some Ready or Not vibes in this movie, in both the characterizations and the gore. But yes, this feels like a really gory survival kind of film where the characters that come out here toward the end, you see them bloody and tired and battered and worn, and you feel an empathy even for the characters that aren't the nicest because they've been through this bloody war of attrition, which really gives your horror film a sense that the audience is going through the adventure with the characters. I like that, so the gore's well used here. Comedy, again, another positive. I talked earlier about the comedy characters and the interspersement of dialogue, which is comedic, along with the serious stuff. So I'm going to give the comedy here a plus as well. Is it exactly the perfect balance of comedy and horror that I like? No, because I kind of like 80% horror, 20% comedy. This one kind of goes into like 60-40, 55-45 kind of territory. A little too much comedy for me, but it doesn't detract that much because of, again, the premise of the movie being so outlandish to begin with. Setting. I love the setting. You guys know I love one-setting movies. You know I love enclosed things where characters feel trapped and have to make decisions for their survival. This does it well. They are trapped in this one-setting location, but it is a vast mansion, very much the style of the 30s and 40s horror movies of that time period, which makes a lot of sense to me because the characters are trapped, but there are so many rooms and so much space to explore in this dingy place that it does make you feel trapped while also giving the characters room to breathe. And I saw in one of as I was doing the credits for this movie, I saw they compared this to 1936's Daughter of Dracula, which makes sense to me. I didn't think of it as a spiritual sequel or reimagining, but apparently it is, and now that I see that, it makes the movie make a little more sense to me as well. But with all that being said, now I want to touch on a couple of negatives. I have a lot of positives for this thing, but I've got some big negatives as well. Lack of likable characters. That's the thing. You come into this getting a sense of who these characters are right from the start and through their interactions, and they're not terribly likable. And as the film goes on, especially when you get into the final third of the film, when you get into those last 25 minutes, 30 minutes, you really start seeing unlikability in a lot of these characters. And the problem you run into when you're watching a horror movie with unlikable characters is you're cheering for the villains and you're cheering for the gore. You want to see these characters get killed, and you want to see it happen in a gory way. And that's not necessarily what you're going for in this film. When you start to break down who's doing what and why, and they give you these twists, you start to go, okay, well, who do I really cheer for? Melissa Barrera, in a way, yes, she does bring an extra layer of heart and backstory that you want to see her push through some of these things. But even her, she's not entirely likable as a character in this, and none of the other ones really are. Aside from their really good one-liners and some of their good chemistry, for what they're there for and what they become, what they enter the scenario into and how they leave it, you don't really want to cheer for anybody, so you kind of just want everyone to die. And that's not really, as a storyteller, what you want to see in a horror movie. So, again, because of the premise, you get away with a little more, but it feels like no one is there to cheer for in the end, except maybe Melissa Barrera. Too many twists. I was really on board with this movie until that last half an hour. Those last 20 or 30 minutes really made me go, okay, they're trying to make this different. They don't want this to just be another Killer Kid movie. They don't want this to be another vampire movie. There's a billion of those already. They want to do a fresh take on the genre. But again, it feels like they're making different movies here. By the end of the movie, it's not just a twist, and then a twist on a twist, and then, oh, surprise, and then, oh, this character could go in a different direction. Oh, there's another twist. They put a lot of twists in here and put a lot of duality into these characters here, and usually I would praise that. When I'm talking about originality, when I'm talking about twists, when I'm talking about subverting expectations on an old genre and making a fresh movie in an already tired genre like vampire movies, normally these are very big positives. Here, to me, it kind of fell apart in that last third because in trying to make a lot of twists and trying to be original, again, you are changing the tone of the movie, taking us into a direction we didn't necessarily want to go, at least all of us didn't want to go, and making the characters more unlikable in the process because now there are not clear sides as to who to cheer for. Again, ambiguity in characters is realistic. Having the twist and doing something original is a positive. But in the way they did it, it felt like they were jumping all around and had no clear vision going forward. I feel like the vision was clear in this movie until that final third, and then they were so focused on doing different things and making their own movie, which I commend, that it went a bit off the rails and lost focus, and I lost focus as to who I wanted to come out of this journey and why. So that's a big negative for me. And then there's another character that pops in here in the final third as well. It won't spoil anything, but somebody comes in here and it's kind of meant to be a big reveal. It's another kind of twist that you don't necessarily expect. Not really a twist, but something you don't expect. And they just pop in and they're just kind of there and you're like, oh, that was a lot of build up for nothing. Oh, this person is here. Why exactly are they here now? Who exactly are they? What do they matter in the grand scheme of things? I don't know. It was just kind of thrown in there. It felt like they were, again, making 3 or 4 different movies by the end of this. So my little fun Night of the Demons horror movie kind of turned into a bit of a convoluted, complicated thing where you couldn't empathize with a lot of what was happening. You could follow it, and a lot of it made sense. And again, I commend them for trying something different. But this something different felt disjointed and felt like it was 10 different writers on the staff. Maybe at this point, the directors and or Shields and Busiek got into some different drafts or different ideals on where it was meant to go, and I think it lost the plot a little bit. So I am turning into a curmudgeon this year with horror because I reviewed Lisa Frankenstein, and that was one of the most reviled reviews that I've had this year because people didn't like that I was a bit negative on it. Everyone else seemed to love that movie, and I just thought it was okay, but I had a lot of issues with it. I liked it. I didn't hate it, but I had a lot of issues with it where nobody else did. I think this is going to be a similar situation where everyone else loves it, and my few friends that have seen it so far loved it, but I necessarily did not. I liked it. I loved it up to a certain point, and then I liked it. It is surely not bad. It's well worth your time. I like all the creators and people involved in this. Go support them. But by the end of the movie, I was kind of left wondering what my intention as an audience member was meant to be. So it is well cast. It is well acted. The dialogue is funny. It's an easy watch. They do try and make it original. The gore's really good. There's beautiful people in this, people you recognize in this. There's a lot of good to be had in this movie. I just think that by the end, it runs a bit long and it starts to really get disjointed and you kind of lose focus on what you're meant to focus on. So That being said, I'm still going to give this movie a 6.5 out of 10. Well above average, but nowhere near elite status for me. So it falls a little bit in the middle. 6.5 out of 10 for me. What did you guys think? Tell me in the comments down below. Am I being too hard on this? Am I turning into a horror curmudgeon? Tell me in the comments, please. And like, share, and subscribe if you like these deep dive videos. Again, if you want to go back and check out things like Ready or Not and Lisa Frankenstein, I've reviewed those on this channel already. Coming up later in this week, aside from all the Pittsburgh Steelers draft stuff that I do, I'm also going to be covering Late Night with the Devil, and that's going to be a review you don't want to miss either. So more reviews are coming, more football stuff is coming. Stay tuned to this channel for future horror reviews. Tell me in the comments what you thought of this one, and I'll see you guys real soon.